Hello and welcome to the Balanced Business Dad podcast. This podcast is just one part of the Balanced Business Dad movement. This movement provides a platform of the important pillars of life while building this council of dads to support each other as we work to balance our lives. The 6 pillars of life that we strive to balance are our faith, our health, our marriage, fatherhood, brotherhood, and our business. We are here to build a council of dads to celebrate wins and as well as to share the challenges of being a husband, a father, and all the while working to keep our pillars in balance. The goal of the Balanced Business Dad movement is for dads to be better in all things balanced, because everyone in our lives deserves it.
Hello, dads. Once again, welcome to another episode of the Balanced Business Dad. I'm your host, Dustin Hogue, and with me, as always, my friend, my colleague, my business partner, my senior, Mr. RJ Campbell.
Still the senior. Always
Still
the
the
senior. He's still trying to figure out different adjectives to point out that I'm old.
Yes. Yes. But that's the fun of it. We balance each other out. See those dad joke there? Because I'm younger and you're older. So, guys, welcome to another episode. Hope you enjoyed the last episode. Our goal is just to bring you constant value here on how to be better every day. How to be a better dad, how to be a better spouse, how to be a better business person, how to have a better relationships, etc. So, guys, today on the episode, we have a very special guest that I cannot wait to jump into. I'm just going to say his first name because I cannot pronounce his last name. And his first name is Yanni. So Yanni from the Boise area. Yanni, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Very excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So Yanni has quite a story and now is a husband, a father, a coach, and coaches a different industry that I've never even heard really, and as a pastoral coach. So to coach the pastors and the leaders of our churches out there. So I'm looking very forward to this conversation. What I didn't tell him is my best friend's dad was my pastor growing up. So I was in a pastor household most of my life. So I'm really interested in this. Now a very, very small church. But Yanni, tell us, kind of what's going on now in your world and how did you get to this point?
Yeah, no. And again, thank you to all the dads out there. Man, right now I have a sick kid and it caused me to sit back. Even it was interesting preparing to come on this podcast because you never stop being a dad, right? And it was hard. It was going through work today was a little different. I had to retool. And so I'm excited to be here, not just to tell you what I do, but how I help us dads and us leaders and us men, not just retool when we have a sick kid, but retool when we need to retool. And that's what I do. I work mostly with pastors, business owners, helping them to navigate challenges. And here's why. Most leaders can solve most challenges. And there's this handful of challenges that they just can't solve. And eventually the challenge becomes a roommate, an unwanted roommate. And they just kind of go, okay, well, you know what? I guess our car only runs on 3 cylinders, so we won't do hills. And so, right? But this is how we run our business. And it becomes this unwanted roommate. And this is just I guess we just don't have good culture here. Well, I guess we can't charge higher than this. And whatever place in that they're stuck, it's usually because they just don't have the tools to get unstuck. And that's my job. My job is to come in. Sometimes it's not even something negative. Sometimes it's something positive. We're achieving. I just don't know where to go from here. Great. Helping these men, helping these leaders retool and get in the right vehicle to take them exactly where they need to go.
Wow. Now I have a question on that. Do you find a commonality from one business to the next? Is there a consistency of what you are being brought to as that unwanted roommate, or is it just all over the board?
Both. I will say the top 3 are leaders' inadequacies that are causing a ceiling hit. So we've grown as much as we can because the leader is taking as much weight as they can on themselves because they don't know how to go to that next level, would be the first. The second is culture. Oh my word. Leaders don't They don't know how to build culture. They don't know how to maintain culture. They don't understand the purpose of what culture can and can't do. And we don't understand it as men in our families as well, right? The family unit operates, in fact, the Apostle Paul referred to the family unit in the church being very similar, and he talked to them one and the same. So culture's a second. And then honestly, the third is just flat out overworking, burnout. Some clients, I'll walk through the 4 stages of burnout, what that looks like and where they're at and what to do, because I'm not going to call it an epidemic, especially after COVID. We're very,
yeah.
we don't use that word
Well,
anymore.
we cannot use that word anymore.
Yeah. But it is definitely a societal problem.
Yeah. So that was so much to unpack there. A couple things that I liked is just living with your challenges, which I think, and I'm assuming that you find this too, it's then you just don't even think they're challenges anymore. This is just the way it is. I don't even look at that as a challenge anymore. And that one thing that I love the word retooling that you used, that retooling could change so much, because that roommate, they take up a lot of space.
A lot of space.
Right? They take up a lot of space, and pretty much all the pillars that we talk about in our faith, in our health, in our marriage, and as a father, as a brotherhood, as well as in our career. So I love that. Again, I am from a very, very small Midwestern town and grew up in a very small Lutheran Missouri Synod church. And the thought of a pastor having a coach that wasn't God is, or the Bible, is just so foreign to me. So I love this concept because I coach people all the time. I could never have thought of being a coach to a pastor just because I've always kind of put that. So is this normal? Is this new? Or are you kind of a pioneer with that? I would love to hear more about this.
So it is newer. I think coaching as a whole is newer. I've been doing this most of my career. So as an evangelist, which is kind of where I started my pastoral role, I was a pastor for a couple of years, and then I was out speaking. And these pastors, I became somebody that I was a sounding board. I was somebody that a pastor could talk to. I've always had an analytical mind. And so I never had a problem looking at a pastor and saying, well, why would you think that? Or why would you do that? Or where's that going to take you? Where's that going to lead you if you keep going down that road? Let's get in the DeLorean and go 25 years and see what it looks like. Do you like what it looks like? We didn't have a sexy term called coaching back then. I was just a pastor helping pastors. But what started to happen is the business world started to grab a hold of this, because in the business world, you don't have the freedom to suck. You have investors, you have board members, or candidly, you're going to close your business. You don't have the freedom to not be good. In the church world, that's not always the case. People can kind of be mediocre as church leaders and just kind of eke out a life. That's not why Jesus came. He came to give us life and life more abundantly. But the business world was really the first to adopt this. And what you have right now is leadership, denominational leadership going, you know what? I think our pastors need help. And a lot of us pastors going, yeah. But this is not revelation. Like, this shouldn't be revelation for you.
And it's not in Revelation.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Finally realizing that.
And so it is becoming a little bit more mainstream, but it's still very foreign. Pastors are still very siloed, as are some business owners. Nobody understands. I have these unique situations, right? Oh my gosh. If what I just need, and they'll tell you their silver bullet, and you're like, all you're going to do is shoot yourself in the foot. So can we talk about something real? And here's the other thing, since we're on this topic, people will look at me and go, well, why you? Who are you? And I'll answer that with 2 things. Number 1, I'm called of God to do this. And so I tell pastors all the time, look, the only reason why people should sit in the seats in your church and listen to you pontificate through a sermon is because you're called by God to do this. It's the only reason you should listen to me. Having said that, your people should listen to you because you're called to do this. You really should listen to me. The other side of that is I have been doing this for 20 years. I've done this in the business world off and on for over 10 years at some pretty high levels of coaching and consulting and training. And there are things that leaders don't know, or that leaders do, or leaders don't understand, that get them stuck. And I have a history of helping them get unstuck. I'm trained to do it. So let's rock and roll, baby.
Love it. That is such a great way to look at that. So it's interesting because, again, because of how I was raised, and I don't know how much experience you have in the Lutheran Missouri Synod denomination, but in Midwest, I never looked at it as a business, the church as a business. And then, I'm a certified John Maxwell coach and speaker, who really is the first time I ever heard him talk about the church is a business and what he had to do as a pastor, and the pastoral teachings he had was not business. It was not budgets. It was not any of this, right? It was in the word. So when he had to develop those leaderships from outside of the church, is my really, I guess, first acknowledgement that no, it is still a business. So coaching business leaders as well as coaching pastorals, I mean, how much overlap is there? I would assume there's quite a bit.
There's quite a bit. And to address that, the fact that any church can take in tax deductible donations, it means they're a 501c3. And that is a corporate, and just sit with that for a moment. So as a pastor, you're the nonprofit version of a CEO. You're a CEO, right? You have a board. You literally have a board. Now, not all churches need to become corporate entities, but the moment you become a corporate entity, it's a business entity. And yet, I'll be honest, our schools, where we get our MDivs and where we get credentialing, have not caught up. And so we're diving into Hebrew and hermeneutics and the original Greek, and we should dive into all of that. But I sat with one pastor who was brand new, and I had to work this pastor through what an annual business meeting is and what they need to do. And I'm thinking, how did you get here?
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, that's how business owners are, right?
Oh, yeah.
I grew up in a contractor. So my dad was a concrete contractor, and he became that because he did concrete. And then he started doing concrete on the side. And then he's like, I can have my own business. At no point did anybody come alongside of him and go, okay, you're now a leader of an organization and a business entity. Here's how to not destroy it.
Not at all.
Oh, wow. It's so true.
But the interesting part about that is, I have an MBA, I have a master's in business, and they don't teach you that either. So
fair.
I would much rather learn from the concrete business owner versus academia these days. Because, it's more real life. So, and that could be a whole nother episode talking about academia.
Yeah. Dustin and I met because we both sold advertising. So we're dealing with small business owners who worked for, back then, the Yellow Pages. So you guys have to look that one up on Wikipedia to figure out what the hell the Yellow Pages is. So we always joked about that. We learned more dealing with these small business owners than we ever learned in college. And you're dealing with concrete contractor, the HVAC, the roofing guy, the plumbing guy, then running big, fantastic businesses. And they had so much knowledge. And it was not that they figured it out in college.
Well, and you know what's interesting about that is what I've found, and again, the Apostle Paul was right about the connection. No one's coming alongside these business owners and saying, here's how now you run a business. No one's coming alongside husbands and saying, here's how you become a good husband. You have a dad and they hand you this baby and there's no owner's manual. We get more instructions when we buy a Toyota than we're handed a child.
No instruction manual. They just hand it to you and expect it not to die in 4 days.
Yeah, that's it. Honestly, to the point of, okay, well, I feed, change. And now they try and do some classes, but that's not fathering, that's life support, right? And so now the Bible has those instructions, but people have not come along. And then the fact of the matter is, and we were talking about this before the show, no one's coming along with a manual that says, hey, it's 2023. Here's what a man looks like in 2023. And so there's so much of what I do is completely interconnected. And to your point, is there overlap? Yeah, because people are people, humans are humans, Christ is Christ, and the problems are problems for that reason.
Love that. And business is business.
And business is business.
I love that. Couldn't have said that better myself. So that's awesome. So we also talked a little bit before the show about coaching or in the leadership of the husband and wife. I'd love to dive into that because I know so many of the obviously dads that are listening are married. And a challenge that I've seen, because I've coached a lot of people, is where these men will have these business ideas and they're great and we're going to change the world doing this idea. And then you come home so ecstatic and your wife's like, that's great. Or says, yeah, you said that 2 weeks ago with this other idea. And it hurts, right? And it's kind of that validation we kind of sometimes need as men. But I've seen that so much in men I've coached, and then coaching men and women together. That's a whole nother thing. So we'd love to get your feedback on that.
So this is an interesting spot because a lot of it depends on how the family structure is set up. And here's what I mean by that. If you own a business, if you're a pastor, is your wife involved? That's the first place. And the answer is always yes. Always yes. And then the question is, in what capacity? So the first thing that every leader needs to do is define their spouse's role. Is their spouse a co-pastor or co-owner? Is their spouse a consultant? Is their spouse an advisor? Is their spouse a therapist? What is their spouse's role within the leadership of this organization? And how's that role going? Especially those that, like pastors, where they run a board, they will spend so much time coddling the communication with their board, which they should, or coddling the communication with their staff, which they should, but not with the silent partner, right? 501c3s have silent partners all the time, but so do churches. And so one of the things that as I'm working with the clients, sometimes I'll look at them and say, I think your spouse needs to be in this, because I think your spouse has a bigger role in the decision-making process. And because you're not acknowledging that, that's what's causing the stuck. And then to your point, if you know who your spouse is, then you can address them in that way. So if your spouse, if you trust them and they are that consultant advisor and they're encouraging in normal relationship, and you've come home with this grandiose idea and they start to pull it back, that might be because it needs to be pulled back. Because if they've been a trusted advisor before, it doesn't mean they're right. It doesn't mean you're wrong, but it should cause you to slow down. If they haven't functioned as an advisor in the past, then don't take their statements now as an advisor. Now's not the time for you to allow them to arm up as the consultant advisor, right? So you have to acknowledge the type of relationship that's there. And then that begets the question, well, what do you do? What do you do if you come back and, man, you're going to conquer the world, you're going to rule the world, and your spouse goes, that's a stupid idea, right? Okay. If you're the guy who started Tesla, you get divorced. No, that's a cheap shot. Sorry. I feel bad now.
But with Amazon, same thing.
Yeah. Well, but in some ways, nobody could keep up with him. Right. And so he went after his passion in business instead of family. Okay, that's the decision that he made. Sometimes, let me say it to you this way, all you dads out there who have these ideas, think of it this way. Your ability, get that idea and run with it, is always, in the business world, it's always based on, can you sell to the right clients, buyers, and investors? Guess what? All three are wrapped up in one person, and it's your spouse. Can you sell it to your spouse? If you can't, take a time out, find someone like Dustin or myself, and find out why. Maybe you don't have a great idea. I think about, I don't know who was on Shark Tank, but they invented a screen that goes over, I'll never forget this moment, that goes over the toilet when you flush the toilet because spray comes up out of the toilet. And so they invented, and it's a screen and it automatically moves over. And they're going through this whole thing. I'm thinking, this is genius. And one of the sharks goes, I'm sorry, I everything you're saying in the spray, I get it, but my toilet has a toilet seat.
It has a lid.
It has a lid.
Came with it.
Yeah. And the presentation was over. It was done. Like, and I remember thinking, no one in your life, they allowed you to get on national television. No one in your life said, hey, Smart Start, here, come into the bathroom. See this? Here we go.
So true.
That guy was not married. or he did something to really tick his wife off, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go ahead and tell him this is a great idea. Take this one in front of the nation, big boy. So it's funny, we were talking about it, your wife as a trusted advisor. So I've had business of my wife and I were partners in real estate investing. So everything's hand in hand. Dustin and I just recently bought a business, just the two of us who partnered in and bought a business. And that was part of it to my wife. It's like, no, you're not in this one. This is us as a partnership. You're not on the LLC. This is our business. You don't have to worry about it. We're not taking your money, those type of things. And, like day 3 of us having it, she says, oh, how's it going down at the shop? I'm like, oh, it's going well. How's it doing? She starts asking detailed questions. I'm like, I thought we said this one isn't your business. And she just kind of looked at me with that. Yeah, that's really cute. That's great. So anyway, how much did they sell today?
She probably could have said, it's all my business.
It's all my business, right?
Yeah. Don't think it's not my business.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not my business, but it's definitely my business.
Yeah.
So,
well, you know, the trusted advisor part, I love that. My wife's involved in all of our businesses, even the one I have with RJ, not as much as the other ones. And yet our wife should be a trusted advisor, right? We did, trusted advisor to marry them, to have children with them, most likely, right? So I love that. They should be our trusted advisor. I also love that if you can't sell them per se, reform your pitch a little bit, right? Or can you not sell them because of history repeats itself and you've brought up a lot of ideas and you never came through anyway, which again, that's why you would get a coach.
Or is your wife taking you into the bathroom and it's the toilet seat?
And it's the toilet seat.
Right? Sometimes I know a company and the head leader is bullish, headstrong, knows where he wants to go, and knows how to succeed. And because he's that type of person, he built a multi-million-dollar company that employs hundreds of people, and he's won awards doing it, and it's fabulous. And I watched his greatest strength become his greatest weakness because he got into a time where his business segment was undergoing a big shift, right? I mean, we can talk about this all day. Kodak from film, they invented the digital camera and never did anything with it. Now who's Kodak, right? And his industry was going through this shift. And the thing that made him strong, because he wasn't listening to anybody else, he knew where he was going, actually became his kryptonite because he needed to listen to people who were saying, Mayday, Mayday. And that's probably one of the toughest things is not just who you listen to, but identifying when it's time to listen. Sometimes the right thing is going to come from the wrong person. And you have to be okay with that.
So true. So true. Man, I'm loving this conversation. I guess, we always talk about balance, obviously, the Balanced Business Dad podcast, and talking about, in our opinion, what it means to be balanced is be that modern man, but without giving up your masculinity. But what I always love to hear about is people who were not in balance at one time in their life and then was able to pull it back. They were able to get back that balance. They were able to get back in flow. So we'd love to hear a time, if you don't mind sharing, that things were just out of whack for you. And how did you get them back on track?
So I don't trust successful people who've never failed.
Love that.
So I'm going to tell you about my failure. I was coaching and training for a Fortune 200 company. And I made a shift to making more money. And it was under the promises of, okay, if I make this move, I will be resourced with these things. I knew what I needed. I had those things for 6 to 9 months, was crushing it. And then slowly those things were taken away. And I failed to make a move. I just kept existing. That failure point became a cascading catastrophic event because the stress started to mount. I started taking work home with me. I was more concerned about keeping my job or being successful. So I can't tell you how many times my wife would be like, Yanni, I'm there. I'm sitting there. We're at the dinner table. I'm a million miles. I'm still at work. I might as well be sitting at my desk. And I let it get catastrophic. And then because of that, eventually the company did what I knew they were going to do. They were going to move me on because my numbers weren't looking right, because I didn't have what I needed when I should have made a bold move months ago. By then, my relationship with my wife had been strained. My relationship with my kid had been strained. And you would have thought in that moment, it would have clicked. Nope. No, I doubled down on, my focus to the point where about 2 or 3 years later, when the Lord got a hold of my heart and I started to kind of resurface, I was literally in tears lamenting to my wife. I had missed a couple of years of my kid's life. I mean, I was there, I was present, but I wasn't there and I wasn't present.
Right.
And business hadn't gone well. Everything was it was out of balance. It was out of whack. Why? Because in that moment, I let fear trump what Christ did on the cross. I let work become more than who he is through me. And once you fall to that, whatever that idolatry is, whatever that lack of focus is, everything else will cascade and fall down. We see it with Peter walking on the water. The moment he looked at the storm, took his eyes off Christ, right in the water.
Yep.
And so the first thing I had to do was retool and admit. I mean, almost like Alcoholics Anonymous. Hi, my name is Yanni. I have failed as a dad and in business. Look, sometimes we just need to say it. And then I had to come before the Lord and say, Lord, I'm sorry. You're first. What does that mean? What does that look like now? And I had a coworker at the time who just started coaching me, started mentoring me, getting me back on the right road. That's a key thing, right? When you're out of balance, you need somebody to help you get back into balance. I have a psychology minor. I never wanted to go the route of a therapist. I've been to therapy a couple times because I needed to. We've been to couples therapy a couple times because we needed to. I don't trust a coach who hasn't been coached. I don't trust a therapist who hasn't been therapized. They're cologne.
That's a verb. Yeah.
I don't know. But I knew I didn't get there overnight. And God's a God of overnight miracles, but he's also one that believes in the process. And so
Patient.
I had to pull out of it. And I had to come before him and say, Lord, restore what's been lost, because that's part of what he does. And it was probably 6 or 7 months ago, I just broke down crying in front of my wife. By the way, tip, masculinity in 2023, it's okay to cry.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right.
We still don't get that.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Like there's some things I'm like, I don't know if that should be part of masculinity, but I have tear ducts. He put them there. So he created it. It's okay. And I just broke down crying in front of my wife because this realization had come that the Lord had restored relationship with my kiddo. In fact, made it even better, and relationship with our family. But I had to do the work. And here's the other tip. Big wins are made on the backs of small daily right decisions.
Yes.
Every time. So if you're somebody who you want the big win, but it's like you won it by winning the lottery, that's not how God designed it. It's not how life works. That's not masculinity. Gambling to support your life is not masculinity. It's a cheap trick. You've got to show up to life every day, and you have to make the right decisions in the smallest capacities and let them be building blocks to the staircase out of the hole that you find yourself in.
Yeah. That's a line my dad used to use to me. It kind of relates to this, is you can move the largest rock with slow, steady pressure.
Yes.
So a couple things. One's going to be a question, but I think it's interesting. We talk about in our Dad Up Council, which is a mastermind for dads, a balanced business dad. And so we have a framework that we put people through, or that we teach. And the very first one, and it's really what you spoke to, is you have to decide to be better.
Yeah.
And that's where you're basically saying you hit that point. And now I want to ask this as somewhat of a question, because we know we have dads, we talk to them, they're part of the council, and they listen to the podcast, who are out of balance, as you were. They're struggling with these different areas. And now that we're keeping this so biblical, we'll get to use this as a biblical question. What was your road to Damascus moment? Because I know these other dads are looking for theirs. What is that? What did that?
I'm going to tell you it wasn't. And like I said, God is a God of the overnight miracle. He's also a God that believes in the process. My salvation experience, I was not raised in the church, was an overnight miracle. It was a Damascus event. And in fact, I still travel as an evangelist. And when I do, my testimony is a 2-day event. It literally is a 2-day event. My road out of unbalance, it really wasn't, I hit rock bottom. I use the alcoholic analogy, but I didn't wake up laying in a box, right? It wasn't the prodigal son in front of the pig pods going, this is nuts. I knew it was out of balance the whole time. I didn't know what I was stuck, right? There are people who are stuck and don't know they're stuck. They don't want to admit that they're stuck. I knew I was stuck. I just didn't know what to do. And so what I did was I felt the Lord just had me focus on, and this is what he says, just focus on today, right? This is what he says, it was in Matthew 5 or 6. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow has enough troubles of its own, right? Seek first the kingdom of God. And so I just started focusing on today. I can't do anything. I can tell you a watershed moment, and that's when I sat outside the bankruptcy attorney's office and saying, Lord, is this really where we're at? But even then, the delta, the gap between where I was and what I was talking to him about, I just had to focus on today and what was right to do today. And I had to allow, and I've always been somebody who's had mentors and coaches and outside voices. And I had to trust them, and I had to keep trusting them. And that's probably the biggest breakdown for any of your listeners that are like, oh my gosh, I know exactly where he was. I'm there. The biggest thing, and we joked about it earlier. Well, they don't know my client. They don't know where I'm at. Now I have investor issues. Okay. As long as you believe those lies, you're going to stay stuck. There are people out there who can help. You have to build enough relationship with them that you can trust them to lead you out. And look, I'll be honest with you. If somebody came up to me, this is probably going to be unmasculine for some of you. If someone came up to me and said, I'm going to put a gun to your head unless you change your oil in your car right now, I would say, can I just call my wife and kid and tell her goodbye? I know nothing. I know nothing about cars. We were driving down the road. The dashboard light came on. And my wife goes, what's that? I'm like, I don't know. My 8-year-old daughter goes, well, give me the manual. So she grabs the manual and goes, the tire pressure's low. Dad, the tire pressure's low. And I was like, okay. It wasn't a Damascus moment. It was a brick building. Time after time.
Love that.
Listening to the voices I knew I should trust.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So much to take away from that, guys. Make sure you go back and re-listen to that story. This whole episode has been great. That last part there about the tire pressure is something that we've been joking about, talking about, well, that's not masculine, that is masculine. The modern man doesn't mean you're not giving up your masculinity because you don't have a sword, or you're not rolling around in the cold water, and it's not malicious training or militant training. In our opinion, the modern man and masculinity and showing up as a man in today's environment is being balanced and having all the right things there. Right? We talk about all the time that our only goal is to wake up tomorrow and be better than we were today.
That's it.
Just be better. That's what it's all about. That's what the Balanced Business Dad's all about. That's what the Dad Up Council is all about. And Yanni, thank you so much for this episode. This has been great. It hit on so much of the things that we believe in, on what we're trying to have out there. One of the other things that you said is always have those mentors in your life. The people that are in your life, the mastermind, if you will, to have it in your life, which started, Napoleon Hill, I think, first started the first masterminds. Yet it's to make sure that people are speaking into you what you need to hear, right? And God puts those people in your lives. Sometimes it's through paid masterminds. Sometimes it's through the homeless guy on the street has even spoke knowledge into me before, right? So make sure we're listening. Make sure if you don't have that, you find someone like that. Sounds like a cheap plug, but I'm going to plug it anyway. But that's really what the Dad Up Council is all about, right? So if you guys don't have anything like that, look it up, dadupcouncil.com. We have a lot of things going like that to help the balance or the business dad out there. We have retreats and all sorts of things that we would love to help you with. But, back to Yanni, we appreciate you being here. I want us to stay in touch. I love the idea of pastors having coaches. That is such a neat thing in my world, just because my second father figure is a pastor. So it's really cool to see that. We just appreciate you being on the show. And then RJ, close us out.
Well, I was going to ask too, Yanni, ways to get a hold of you?
Yeah.
Places to find you, all that good stuff. We left you out of this whole thing.
Who am I? I don't have a dad up council. What am I? So best way to get a hold of us is our website, gratsllc.com, GRATSLLC.com. And there's a business portal. There's the ministry portal. There is a preaching portal. There's something literally for everybody. We have a free training page. If you don't want to talk to another human being and you just want a bunch of free training, yes, it's geared mostly for pastors, but it's great for everybody. There's so many different topics that we cover. That's the best way to get a hold of us, understand us a little bit more. I just want to say thank you for having me on, number one. And number two, look, dads, men out there, just don't shut this podcast down and do nothing. That's the travesty. And understand you have 72 hours. The rule of 72 says you have 72 hours to take action on what you've just heard, or you probably won't. Make yourself accountable. Tell that consultant, business partner, wife of yours, man, I just heard this and I need to do this. Will you please check with me in 2 days to make sure I've done it? I'm telling you, you won't be sorry for that moment.
Love that.
Love
Great
it.
advice.
All right. Wow. That's fantastic. So guys, as we say every time, we just thank you for listening to the podcast. This is, it's a little trite, but it's just our gift to you. I mean, it's a free podcast and it's out there because we just want to help dads, working, business owning dads to be better every day. You can find us on Facebook. We do have a public Facebook group. So we've got 300 plus dads that are out there communicating and doing life together. So on Facebook, just search for the Balanced Business Dad and we'll invite you in and share a little content here and there and have some fun. So that's the easiest way to stay with us. And then Dustin mentioned the Dad Up Council. That's our private, it's a mastermind group for dads, for business owning dads. So we offer a lot in that. And you can find that in the Dad Up or just dadupcouncil.com. I know I get that one wrong every time. But again, thanks for listening. The way to help us out, get this out there, rate and review. Rate the podcast. That lets it get noticed by more people so more dads can find this and hear great stories like Yanni has.
Guys, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.